still, and as Brent went to pick it up to take it outside, this thing erupted into flight, nearly bashed him on the nose as it flew away, and then promptly managed to navigate its way outside of the window, out of the window, this time managing to successfully negotiate with the fan and fly around it rather than into it. Lots of different species. We do see them on the live drives every now and again, fluttering about. Thank goodness we've got such incredibly talented cameramen, because they're skilled enough to catch them in mid-flight. Most of the time, however, we don't get to see where they roost during the day. Where I used to live, which was an old farmhouse, we would see them all the time. They used to live in the roof of the house and flutter in and out every evening and every morning, and they'd come and they'd sit. My record was 8 of them at one point, watching me as I went to the bathroom, which is always a strange sensation, because although their navigational skills are incredible, they're very, very good at not flying into things. Every now and again they make a mistake, just like human beings. Every now and again we stub our toes or whatever else we happen to do, or knock our knees, and they do occasionally fly accidentally into your head, which has happened to me once or twice, not often, but once or twice. You've got to be careful with bats and in terms of touching them, because they are serious vectors of disease. They're carriers of rabies. They generally don't suffer the symptoms, but they can carry it in a passive manner. And if you do get bitten, it's very, very important that you have that seen to straight away. Although, that being said, I did read an article recently on bats that suggested that they might not, that the rabies virus might not actually be as common as initially suspected in bat populations, and that it might be more the jackals and the mongoose families that carry it and transmit it on to other wild animals. Okay, we're heading for the crest, Brian, as the sun starts to rise. Whoop! Times have changed. Oh no, sorry, Brian. There is a lioness at the Djuma Dam. It's our lioness. I'm sure it's the one that's... Okay, we have to switch out of low range for this. I'm sure it's the one... I'm sure that it is the one that has the cubs. I'm not sure exactly where Brent is. I'm probably about 5 minutes away, give or take. Sorry, everybody. We're going to have to do a bit of a Ferrari safari. Brian, please don't get hypothermia. Brian says he'll try. The reason I'm so excited is that that lioness, I think, is the one that is denning in that drainage line. So she's got cubs, and I really want to go see if we can see suckle marks. I think it's pretty much an even toss-up between which of us is closer, Brent or myself. We're probably equidistant. So while we race across there, let's go back to James around his nice warm fire.
Hello everybody. Again, you can see the day has kind of broken behind us, which is very nice. There's a bit of grey light filtering through the clearings behind us. The birds have begun calling. What is that swizzling call there?
White-barred scrub robin. The go-to bird when...
There is a swizzling call behind us, which may or may not belong to white-browed scrub robin. The francolins have started yelling. The baboons, there's one coming right out. I forgot, John, I can't actually move that camera. Baboons coming out of the trees now. One of them jumped 3 meters onto the ground because it saw Eugene and got a very big fright. Anyway, he's disappeared off into the dawn light, not Eugene, the baboon. And it's all rather pleasant out here now, I must say, very pleasant by our fire. Connor has brought us a kettle. We're making some coffee, so Brent and Jamie are freezing on their own with VM and Brian. Now, Betty, you had a lovely question about water recycling in the Sabi Sands. Does it happen? Betty, it does to a certain extent, and it doesn't to some extent. So, I mean, the water that we get comes out of the ground, and eventually, yes, it does fetch back up in the ground. Do we have an active recycling program? In all honesty, we don't. But because we live in a camp that's relatively small, and we don't have baths and that sort of thing, we've got showers that are normally cold, and so we don't use a lot of water when we're having a shower. They're not normally cold at all. The water does filter back into the ground. And so I suppose that is a form of recycling. It is certainly something that many of the lodges down on the Sand River are working at, because in order to deliver a 5-star experience and to charge the prices that they do, and they do need to charge those prices in order to maintain this area, you can't really say to somebody, well, you know, you can only have a bath once while you're here, because people will go somewhere else. And so they're expecting a kind of, I guess, Hilton-esque hospitality experience in the context of the bush. And so many of them are working on solutions of recycling water, but water usage out here in the tourism areas certainly is something that is definitely worth consideration and that people do a lot of work on. Now, Stefan, I want to show you my picture. Would you like to see my picture?
I would like to see your picture.
And then Deandre will show you all my picture, everyone. There it is. Oh wait, no, that's off genre. We don't want that one. There, that's artistic.
It is.
I'm so artistic.
I think you got the composition just right there. The colours are fantastic, rich, saturated.
Thank you very much.
We're trying to teach genre how to give positive reinforcement for.
What do you think, Deandre? Best photo ever. Is that what you said?
Wildlife photographer of the year.
Wildlife photographer of the year. That, of course, is a slight insult because he's calling us all wildlife, but that's, thank you, Deandre, that's not a bad compliment from you. And Ginny, you want to know about renewable energy in the Sabi Sands. We use a little bit of renewable energy, don't we?
I think it's getting there. I know of 2 projects, one of a reserve just slightly to our south, that has taken their entire staff village onto renewable energy, solar panels, and as far as I understand, a good portion of their room's electricity is generated by solar and stored on batteries. And I know that the owner of this particular reserve, on an adjacent farm that he has, is working on to a zero electricity usage from the grid model by next year or the year after, where the electricity that he uses to farm with will be completely offset by the electricity generated by solar panels on his farm. And he gave me a very interesting statistic the other day. He said that if 800 farmers did what he did, they wouldn't have had to build the Medupi power station.
He was.
How's
That's
that?
incredible.
And it's free land. It's
unbelievable.
on land that was reclaimed farmland, so it would take the next 30-40 years or whatever to get back to a natural state, and he just decided to put up some solar panels there, which
I think that's fascinating.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think a lot of we've got solar panels here running the Gari repeater, for example. That's why when it goes cloudy, sometimes the Gari repeater needs a little bit of a boost, kick in the pants, which Eugene gives it every so often. Tony, a nice question from you. How do we get the local people involved in conservation? I think it comes down to almost one simple word, and that's awareness. It's not education so much as awareness. As people need to understand and need to derive some kind of benefit from this, they need to be brought into discussing how they could be deriving benefits from the rural areas. And I mean, look, I've painted possibly a slightly negative picture of that articulation between local people and wildlife. But, you know, let's take the Sabi Sands. There are probably 2,000 jobs within the Sabi Sands. That's local people. Each of those people is supporting between 6 and 8 people, sometimes up to 10. And so if you look at it like that, the Sabi Sands is supporting 15,000 people. But there are obviously a lot more. And there is a 60% unemployment rate in many of the villages out here. And so the conversation will continue. And I do think that there has to be a lot more dialogue, and I do think that there has to be a lot more kind of awareness, especially in the younger kids. They need to grow up with the knowledge. You know, a lot of those kids out there think that there are tigers in this reserve. They've never seen an elephant or a lion or a buffalo, and certainly there are efforts afoot to change that, but I think those could certainly be stepped up a bit. So Tony, that's a very nice question there.
I once heard a nice statement that said conservation is a first world luxury. And it absolutely is. Even in South Africa, where the difference between haves and have-nots is so big, we grew up as haves, and we have this notion of conservation and this need and this want and this love and appreciation for conservation, but the have-nots don't. They see conservation areas as competition for resources, for grazing. They see it as a threat. Animals escape the reserves and eat their livelihood and, you know, threaten their lives and break their homes or whatever. And it brings it into very stark focus, that statement.
And I mean, if we go back to that little example of the toaster or the kettle that we boil, you know, I remember driving through, as a kid, driving through rural villages on the way to game reserves and seeing litter everywhere and feeling, you know, how can people do this? And being totally unaware that every time I put the kettle on, of course, however, just because the carbon that I'm producing is invisible, doesn't make it any less littering. And so that's, you know, a good thing to think about. Jamie is knocking about here somewhere. I think she might have something interesting to tell you.
Knocking about, actually not far away from where James is now. We're making our way towards the dam. I want to investigate exactly what it is that has scared that lioness or that has attracted her attention. So that's where Brian and myself are shivering our way to. It's now a question of whether we will freeze or get to the lioness in time. I'm just investigating something. I thought I saw a baboon in Yuri's garden, but I think that might just have been my imagination. Although James did say that he could hear baboons calling this morning. So this is most likely the lioness that is, we think that she's denning around the drainage line just to the east of the dam. Now the problem is here, if there are guests in the lodge, we cannot go across and right in front of it. So I'll have to do a roundabout approach to this. I think Brent is approaching from the north. I've come through from the south. Let's just see if we can do this without disturbing anyone. We're still not entirely sure if there are guests at Voyatella at the moment or not. We're just going to go around slowly. I think it looks very quiet. Looks like all of the lights are off there. Yeah. Hello, buffalo. Standing by. Copy. Here we go, some buffalo bulls all clumped together. One lioness is most definitely not a threat to these leviathans of the buffalo world. They are absolutely enormous. Definitely not threatened by her. There's no way that on her own she could hunt a fully grown buffalo bull. Lots of them all together though, clustered for safety. Right, let's go find this lioness. Still not 100% sure that the lodge is empty. Brent's approaching from the north, I'm approaching from the south. And he's suggested checking around twin dams since she's gone into the drainage line itself. We suspect she's, oh my goodness. Whew. We suspect that she is denning somewhere in the thick bushes in the drainage line to the southeast of the dam. Although James thinks otherwise. He thinks that she's on the north, although she could just have moved ever so slightly. I don't see any lights on at the lodge. I think we're free of guests. They would be up by now. And let's just carry on a little bit further down. I'll go south down Twin Dams. Brent's got that side covered. Let us keep our eyes peeled for this lioness. Well, at least we have an explanation as to why she ran. I think there's a good chance that a buffalo bull decided that it didn't appreciate the pleasure of her company this early in the morning and decided to send her packing. Not unusual for buffalo to chase, particularly lionesses, and particularly a lioness on her own. And while we search carefully, it seems as though I was not mistaken and that there are baboons around. Let's head across into the fireplace.
Well, we're not quite in the fireplace. You can see a few of the baboons there, and they are just crossing over the clearings. They've just come out of the trees, the tall trees around about the house over there, around the final control. They've been up in the fever trees, which of course are very thorny, and you can hear them going, "Bow!" That's what they're doing, very loudly, and some of them are engaged in some rather nefarious activities the other side of the clearing there. Showing their amorous intentions for each other, which is quite amusing. And now we can't see them anymore, I'm afraid. And Gendre, I'm afraid, is immobile from where he is now. Aren't you, Gendre? He's nodding. He can't even talk anymore. It's wonderful. You can insult him at will and he can't do anything. The coffee is complete. It's not bad. One must always drink coffee out of a tin mug when one is in the wild, and so that's what I'm doing here. Now, it's really good to have the baboons back with us because they are truly entertaining, and of course they're entertaining and disturbing because many of their behaviors are so similar to human behaviors, and I always think that they're a little bit like a prison gang. And if you watch them knocking about the place and you watch the way they raid different areas, it's like watching a prison gang at work. Thankfully they haven't come raiding towards the fire. I'd have been very upset if they'd decided they wanted to have some of our coffee. Now, still at the fireside, of course, is Mr. Stefan van der Boer. Stefan, are you pleased that the baboons have returned?
Yeah, I suppose it's a double-edged sword that I am, because it's quite nice seeing baboons on drive and showing them to you, of course, and they do get up to some fantastic antics. But it almost always evolves into a camp raiding sort of reign of terror that they have, and it becomes a sort of battle of wills against how you outsmart baboons and, you know, how they outsmart you, which is 99% of the time. So yeah, it comes with a bit of a bittersweet feeling, I suppose. Yeah.
Judy H, you're asking about compost. We've talked a lot about, I suppose, appropriately for World Environment Day, we've spoken a lot about water recycling and renewable power, and you want to know about composting. Do we compost things? I think the camp does compost the wet waste. I'm not sure exactly where it goes. We don't grow anything here, you see, so I mean, for us to be using it in a garden, for example, we have small gardens now in the camp, thanks to old Sam, who's unfortunately left us, and there is a bit of compost on those. But no, we don't particularly compost. Out in the villages, though, absolutely, people do use their wet waste, and many of our vegetables come from a local village farm. And this is the kind of, to me, this is where sustainability really meets the road, if you like. The rubber meets the road. That is the worst mixed metaphor I've ever used in my life. Anyway, local produce, stuff grown locally by local people on local land, using local things like local compost and cow dung and that sort of stuff. That is where we're going to make a sustainable difference to the people out here. Yeah. When there is sufficient supply for us to have the lodges out here and all of the tourists supplied with high quality, sort of Michelin star quality ingredients grown in the local area from things like composting and sort of sustainable use of land out here. That's where we're really going to kind of make a big difference.
And I know there's been a good few projects using kitchens, wet waste, or the scrapings from kitchens and leftovers from food that has passed its sort of hotel standard use-by date in piggeries up and down the Kruger National Park. So that's been going on for quite a few years. I know there's quite a lot of piggeries, not large scale or anything, but definitely helping local farmers utilize waste here.
Yeah. And you know, it's smaller. It's those smaller projects that are going to make a difference. It's not these kind of industrial-sized things where you have an administration-heavy conglomerate where most of the money, it's got to be enormous for anybody to derive some kind of an income from it. It's those small piggeries that create a relationship, say, with Djuma or with a lodge somewhere else where they become the sole pork supplier, for example, and then there's a local chicken supplier that does the same sort of thing, and you have free-range chickens coming in. That's a really kind of sustainable way, I think, for this area to move forward. And then, Jen, you want to know about thatching. Do people get the opportunity to fetch thatch? They do in the Kruger, not so much on this reserve because the landscape is wrong for it. There isn't much thatching grass on the granite-derived soils. Would you say that's accurate?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I do know of some thatching grass thickets on open areas where too much burning has taken place, but there's no there's not lots. You know? There's not a lot of thatching grass here.
Yeah. But I do know that in some parts of Kruger, certainly people are allowed to come in and fetch thatching grass. On the gabbro-derived soils, probably, it's a different geology to what we're sitting on now, and then you do get that long kind of thatching grass growing there. But remember, to harvest thatching grass in amongst the lions and the elephants and the buffalo, well, it takes a certain amount of security detail to make that a safe thing. And in fact, a few years ago, there was a horrible tragedy with people collecting thatching grass totally legally. They were doing it legally, and a fire whipped through the area. And I think it caught 2 or 3 people. They were ringed in and they couldn't escape, and so that was a real tragedy. It's not, a lot of people, if you said to them, would you like to come into the reserve to fetch some thatching grass, they'd say, are you out of your mind? I'd far rather go down the road to the hardware store, spend a little bit of money and buy some corrugated iron, because it's actually less effort, it lasts longer, and well, your chances of you being ironed by something very large and hairy are that much smaller. So yeah, in terms of natural building products, not so much. Medicine, though, would be a big thing that people can come and collect.
I mean, I'd like to add at this point that there's a lot of very good institutionalized endeavors to try and unlock how people can sustainably utilize this environment. Excuse me. Everything from cultivating plants and agriculture to collecting bush medicine and cultivating bush medicine to innovative business strategies. I'm just thinking in my mind now, up and down the Kruger National Park, people are really taking it seriously. They're really taking this drive towards incorporating local people into these reserves. They almost universally accept the fact that the sustainability of tourism in this area, the sustainability of these wilderness areas, is tied inextricably to the communities on the outskirts here. And there's a lot of good initiatives. So just to reassure you all, from an institutional level, governmental level, all the way down to business owner level at this side, and even individuals, are making a huge difference and a huge impact. It's just, lack of awareness of these projects is probably our downfall rather than it not happening.
And I think one of the really nice examples would be Michael Grover, who's the general manager of Djuma's husband, and he's an ecologist, highly progressive ecologist, and he does a huge amount of work in the communities outside here with cattle grazing. And we've heard us mention quite a lot about how, or certainly me, how the buffalo look pretty good at the moment, but the cattle outside look like they're on their last legs in many respects, and that in many respects is a disaster, because much of the wealth that local people have, the meager wealth that they have, is tied up in livestock. And there are ways, and Mike's engaging with them in trying to manage the rangelands on which those cattle graze more effectively, so that the cattle, without reducing their numbers, will survive more sustainably. So there are definitely projects afoot that are very important. Let's head across to Brent, find out. We definitely heard some lions. Maybe he's got an update on them.
There was that Nkuhuma Lioness at the pan moments ago, and we're pretty sure she's the one who's got cubs on Djuma somewhere and in one of these little river systems. So unfortunately we weren't quick enough to get to the pan before she disappeared. But Jamie and I are both in the area circling now, and hopefully we are going to find her. And wouldn't it be incredible if we found those little baby lion cubs? Well, thanks for the update, Morning Glory, who says it was a hippo who chased the lioness off. So sad we lost her. Me too. And I know Viam is as well, and I'm sure Jamie and Brian feel the same. Hopefully we will be able to catch her again shortly. and it's got colder, if you can believe it. I reckon, especially here where we are, right down next to the river systems, it must be at least 48, or at most 48, 50, so around 9 degrees Celsius. But if we can find that lioness, it's all worth the chill. From Final Control that James was chatting about global warming, VM's response is, well, we could use some global warming about now. And as it gets colder, I almost tend to agree with him. Come on, kitty cat. Now, if she didn't get a good drink and that hippo chased her off, she might go back later on, so keep an eye out on that damn cam. Thanks very much, Morning Glory, who says she has faith in us that we will find the lioness. I hope you're right. Now, my hot water bottle's even getting a little bit chilly. Well, it's still lukewarm, I suppose it could be described as. How's your hot water bottle, Vim? Vim says he's going to start drinking out of his hot water bottle soon, it's so cold. I must say I'm a little bit envious of that fire at the moment. Melissa says it seemed like she was calling her cubs and then she left. Melissa, was she doing a sort of, or was it a ow, ow? So lioness have a couple of different calls. If she was doing a low sort of, it might have been a contact call for the other adults, but if there was that interspersed with a ow, ow, then she was definitely calling cubs. So we've suspected she's got her cubs somewhere in this low-lying area ahead of us. And so Jamie's checking closer around the waterhole. We've done a wider loop. And we're going to head back into that area now. There we go. Lucy in South Bend, Indiana, says the lioness didn't even get anything to drink, so it is possible she might try go back there a little later. So our eyes are now peeled. Maybe she didn't move too far. Okay, so So this is the little river system. We suspect, we're not sure, that she might be keeping those cubs in. I'm just going to check carefully that maybe she hasn't moved back up here. Come on, madam. Where are you in Nkuhuma? Go away bird alarm calling, but they do alarm call at birds as well, but it is the right area. Thanks, a curious one says it was not a cub call, it was a contact call, so that now I'm going to suffer, but I shall suffer for the chance of a lion. Off with the hot water bottle, off with the leg blankie, and I'm going to try stand and look down into the river system. So while we hopefully get a chance at finding this lioness, let's go see how the two toasty boys next to the fire are.
He really just can't let it go, can he? He's like a dog with a very manky bone, or a hyena with a bone. Oh, it's so hot by the fire, I'm freezing here, risking my life tracking lions, blah, blah, fish paste. Now, our Beard, a very nice question from you about what are the best developments that we know of in the Kruger National Park over the last few years that have made a conservation contribution. Steph, you've got an idea.
The Kruger National Park has sort of remodeled itself recently, and I think contrary to the general belief of the people that were utilizing the park for their own benefit, and everyone expected this downfall and collapse when the Kruger National Park reshuffled its management, probably around about 1998, 1999. I've only seen good things come of it. We've had the park start to utilize more of its surface area, which of course has created more employment opportunities. It's creating new opportunities for business or traditional business to be restructured, and so more money is going to communities on the outskirts, more focused to specific communities or specific projects. And I would just have to say that the rest camps have all been renovated. The redistribution of positions is now finally in its final phases, and so we're getting people actually moving forward. I don't know, this may be a bit controversial with me saying it, but I believe totally that the Kruger National Park is a better place today than what it was 20 years ago, 25 years ago.
Steph, of course, is being very politically correct, and I am inescapably not politically correct. And basically, I mean, before 1994, the advent of the democratic era of South Africa, the Kruger National Park was kind of a bastion of I don't know, it was a very white place. It was a pale white place, and it was a bastion for sort of white conservation efforts, where there very much was a fences and fortress conservation approach, where if you came across the fence, you were in big trouble, and there was no engagement with the people living outside. And as with all changes in political order throughout the world, any government institution, which is what the South African National Parks is, saw a massive change in management, as Steph says. And quite apart from the doomsdayers saying that, well, you know, these people don't know how to manage land and these people don't have the experience, blah, blah. It's, as Steph says, the Kruger National Park is a more pleasant place to visit now. There are far more people visiting it of all races in South Africa, which is extremely important. And so more and more people, more and more South Africans are being exposed to our amazing wildlife heritage, which of course is the whole reason we do what we do. Without people being exposed to the wildlife heritage that we have, what on earth reason would they have to help us conserve it, and why would we want to conserve land and animals if we don't know about them? So that's hugely positive. And I mean, the rest camps in the old days were, I mean, really, shiversomely just poorly designed, and the food, a level that was, well, I mean, just very disgusting. Now you can get a great meal, you can have a clean room, the rest camps are fantastic, more access for people. And of course you were mentioning the private concessions.
So there's 7 private concessions in the park, and they were initially thought out to be a 20-year project. So Kruger National Park doesn't do anything in less than 20-year chunks to see what impact it has. And what they chose was areas in the park that were accessible but very remote areas, undisturbed wilderness, and they basically auctioned off 7 of these chunks to conservation businesses or businesses with a footprint in conservation and tourism to come up with a strategy to unlock. Obviously, lodges were the key. They have a very little impact, apart from the site that they're on, they have very little impact on the footprint of the concession. And obviously generating much marketing for these areas. And another thing that they did was they invited at different levels I want to say, I've forgotten the word now to use, but in this process of unlocking this potential, for these lodges to come up, or these companies to come up with innovative ideas to incorporate the community and incorporate business and see what they can do, and they held to that. Having been part of one of these concessions before, they do a monthly audit on your promises that you made when you were in the beginning, and you held to that on a monthly basis, and on a yearly basis that's audited. I just think it's wonderful, you know. A lot of money gets pumped back into the communities, which is good. It's what's needed.
Dina, very nice question from you. You say if you come out here and you self-cater, which you can do, absolutely, can you get locally grown produce? The answer is yes, to a certain extent, but if I was to pick one project other than well, you're tied in with people here, but certainly if I was to pick one sort of nitpicking real issue that I have, it's the fact that buying starlings flying overhead, you can't buy starlings overhead, buying locally grown produce is very difficult. So, for example, if you buy a lettuce somewhere in some of the major centres around here, it's been grown here, it's driven to Johannesburg to the big market every morning, it's been bought there and then driven back again. And so that kind of thing does irk me quite a lot. And yes, there are areas you can get locally grown produce, but certainly there could be far greater efforts. And I mean, projects like Mike Grover's doing will kind of get that sort of thing to fruition, and it would be great to be able to come to a place and buy only locally grown things, locally grown eggs and chickens and meat. And
I would say it's very possible. I'd say we're probably guilty of our own we're remarking quite negatively on the fact that we don't grow anything, or we don't utilize the majority of our stuff locally. Whereas if you came here and you really wanted to support local communities, you could trade in the villages quite easily.
Yeah,
they grow a lot of their own food, and if we really wanted to, we could actually move into the village and get tomatoes and probably, I don't know, quite a few things. Chicken, absolutely.
Eggs?
Goats.
If you wanted to eat a goat, I suppose you could get a goat. Yeah, delicious. And there was something else of vital importance I wanted to say about this. It's easier to go into a supermarket, put everything into a trolley, put it in a packet, put it in your car, and then go to wherever you're going. But yes, I think Steph's absolutely correct. You could very easily, without anything in the back of your car, come through this area between, say, Hoedspruit and the Kruger National Park gate, and if you drove into the villages, and it would be quite safe to do so, you know, and you had a bit of cash and you asked around, people would point you towards the egg farmer, towards the veggie farmer, towards the chicken farmer, and you would be able to get locally grown produce. That's actually would be quite an interesting exercise to try and do. Maybe we should do that one day. Jamie's got an update for you. She's now no doubt basking in the rising sun, taking the coldness of the morning far more on the chin than her erstwhile friend Brent is. Let's get an update from her.
A slight exaggeration. It definitely took the wind out of my sails there, because I was about to start talking about how freezing it gets just before the sun comes up, but now I have to take it on the chin because James said I did.
It's cold.
It is very cold. It's really cold. I've been trying to take it on the chin, but it has definitely, there's a strange physics involved in the fact that just before the sunrise it gets so much colder. And the glint of the morning light is slowly touching the tops of the trees. So I'm thinking along those lines. I know that there's a ridge between here and Mvubu Road, which is where I'm going to go next to look for that lioness. So I'm thinking, you know, we can sort of sit on the crest there, wait for the sun to reach us. It is very cold. It's the kind of cold that burns your nostrils and your eyes, with the wind chill factor involved as well. That also really doesn't help at all. I think that this lioness might have given us the slip, and it's sad because we have the buffalo to thank for that, in my opinion. I think that they thought about chasing her and she just decided she wasn't going to hang around and have to put up with that. That being said, thank you to Siberia Zumi, who has sent through an update about where they think that she went, and that was into the little thicket, not over the dam wall, but into the little thicket around there. So we'll go and we'll triple check there, but I'm going to do a big loop first. Her tracks come out of exactly the same spot as they did the other day, so it's almost certain that she's denning in that area. We don't want to push too hard. Obviously, if we were to try and follow her in there, we would potentially scare, well, we don't know exactly where the den is itself. We will be keeping a close eye on where we go and how we manage that situation. It is a negative lock. In other words, we can't go tracking in there. Come on, son. We're nearly there, Brian. I see sun on this road. We're going to go and find it. Yeah. And we'll wait for the male lion to come to us. He must just come to us. My suspicion is, though, that lioness is going to try and, you know, just speaking of the cold, it's not just us that feel it. My suspicion is that lioness is going to think about wanting to find some sun of her own. She might not want to be hanging around in the thick drainage line areas when there's sun to warm herself up. She might leave her babies to cuddle up together and go and find warmth of her own. Oh, the noticeable difference as we drive up this road. As you can see, the sudden change in temperature has placed us in an almost misty horror movie type style. Brian's just going to give it a wipe. Sudden changes in, oh, this is wonderful. Sudden changes in temperature. Oh, okay, we're never moving. We're going to just drive slowly up and down, backwards and forwards. And Brian, on that subject, which animals respond to the early mornings the best, apart from us? A lot of the crepuscular animals start to move around in the early mornings. Actually, early mornings is best for a lot of the different animal species because it's that perfect in-between between the nocturnal and the diurnal. But things like wild dogs and cheetah are their most active at this time of the day because they know that later it's going to, particularly in summer, but winter as well, they know that later it's going to get very, very hot and uncomfortable for them. So they want to get as much potential hunting done as they can as they go along. I was just stopping to look at old lion tracks there, but it's not our lioness. And most of the animals are going to start becoming active now. The impala, the buffalo, all of those ruminant animals will be trying to find a nice sunny spot to warm up and to, for now, ruminate. They're not in a rush to start feeding. They are going to be ruminating and just enjoying the fact that they survived the night, and the dark and the cold, and the predators roaming around. And speaking of the temperature changes, Insomniac, good morning and welcome to our now sunrise safari. He wanted to know if all of the chameleons are gone now that it is colder. They're not gone, they are in a state of estivation, hiding up somewhere in trees or in crevices in the ground and basically slowing their metabolism down. But yes, the chances of seeing a chameleon at this time of year is very, very slim. They are particularly sensitive to cold. They are ectotherms, just as all reptiles are, but I did see a chameleon once in midwinter, and it was, the poor little thing just couldn't move. It couldn't even change color. It was so cold. Now they do occasionally come out, but it's very seldom that they do. All right, Lioness. You appear to have disappeared. It is nice to know that she's still there, and I think that pretty much confirms that she has a den site somewhere in that region. We still don't know with 100% certainty, but it seems incredibly likely if she's moving backwards and forwards from that place the whole time. Do one more loop, check around where Siberia Zumi suggested that she might be. Let's see if we can't get this Dacre on camera at the same time. There we go. Don't run, don't run. There we go. Perfect. Thank you, Brian. It's one of the antelope species that I wouldn't say we struggle to get on camera, but definitely we have to work a little bit harder to get them. Most of the time they are dashing away, and all you catch is the fleeting glimpse of a disappearing bottom. In this case we've got a female Dacre, very clear by the lack of horns, and if you look carefully as she turns her head, hello girl. Oh, your mohawk's not very straight up, is it? It's a bit floppy. There she goes. The Dacre have this incredible sort of thick, sticking up, like this bobble, but different, sort of straight patch of hair, triangular patch of hair between their ears. Meant to look intimidating in some way. I'm not sure if you could see very clearly, but in that morning light, her preorbital glands, the glands close to her eyes, were actually clearly visible as dents in her facial structure. Okay. Bumpy, bumpy. Everybody hold on. Morning Glory has said that it's nothing like a search for a lioness first thing in the morning to warm one up and to get the blood pumping in excitement. Oh, that's an absolutely fair point, although I would say conversely, Morning Glory, there's nothing quite like the race towards a sighting to add or drop your temperature about 5 degrees as you speed along. But it certainly gets us really, really excited and interested to try and see if we can't follow up on those animals. I've just heard an update that there's at least one of the Birmingham boys that crossed through Cheetah Plains last night and is now making his way possibly to the west. So we know where 1 and 2 of the Birmingham boys are, but not the rest of them. I'm going to send you back to James and his nice warm fire so that you can warm up there, and we're going to continue the search for this lioness.
Now she's also complaining about the fact that we're at a warm fire. Yes, it is warm. Steph's taken his jersey off, as you can see. I'm still sitting in my jersey in solidarity with my mates out in the bush. Not that I want to be there with them. Now, Ravi, another wonderful question from you all the way from New York. You want to know about dung and whether it's used in burning. Well, buffalo dung, no. Elephant dung, no, because elephant dung just makes a lot of smoke, which can smell relatively pleasant depending on what the elephant's been eating. But cow dung, in local areas, people do use sometimes for fires. I haven't seen it used out here, but Steph says in grasslands or in grassland areas, the dung does tend to be used.
Not the Masai Mara, but the Serengeti definitely, and in desert areas in Namibia, the Heroros. Yeah, I think they absolutely do use it. I mean, it's a common thing in Africa to use, but I think around the world, dung is used as a cement, a flooring, additive, as a cooking. Cooking has been for thousands of years.
I remember going to visit a woman's house, well, her whole family's house, probably must have been around 1986, and she lived on a farm, and they had nothing, these people. They really had nothing. She and her husband, and they had 5 kids, and they lived in the most perfect little situation house-wise. It had an amazing view out over the river, and it was built, the house was, of mud bricks and dung. It was covered in this cow dung, and it gave the place, you can't believe it, how beautiful the smell of this place was. And all you wanted to do was sit inside there and breathe in, because it just smelt like home for some reason, and certainly didn't smell anything like dung does when it comes out of the animal, but it really did smell delicious, and so absolutely used all over the place. I guess a bit like a peat, almost peat fire. It won't make a big flamey fire like this one. Not very picturesque, probably quite smoky. Yeah. But I know that people from the north of Scotland have a technique for lighting peat. I believe it's almost impossible, but they do, and I think it's probably much the same with the cattle dung out here. Jamie has got a mammal to show you.
I do indeed have a mammal, and in fact, a very alert mammal. 2 kudu, a mother and her calf, and they're staring intently off into the distance, but not in a panicked way. I think it's more likely that that oxpecker suddenly was irritating the little one. Yes, those birds are a bit of a pain, aren't they, baby? But they're going to be with you for the rest of your life, fluttering about, picking away the ticks. I don't think they're alert for any reason other than they've spotted something moving in the distance, and it's probably another kudu, just given the way that the longer you sit and watch one kudu, the more kudu you find in the background. I think that's what they were looking at, just trying to make sure that there were no threats coming through towards them. It's such beautiful, graceful creatures. And you can see, if you look carefully, you can actually see how puffed up they are in this cold morning air. And like a lot of the other animals, us included, they have been trying to move onto the crests to keep warm. And there you go. I was saying about if you look for one kudu, others shall appear. Big bull in the back, and he is magnificent. I think I've seen him here before. I think he's one of the biggest, not in terms necessarily of horn size, but in terms of body structure and stockiness. I think that he might be one of the largest kudu bulls I've seen out here. It's very, very bulky, standing well head and shoulders above the female. It's a nice contrast between the two of them. And then slowly wandering along behind us is the rest of the group of kudu. Coming through. A couple of young males cautiously stepping out. Much, much smaller than that bull that is associated with the female. Oh, look at that oxpecker clinging onto its belly. That's amazing. Acrobatics. And here comes the calf. Lots and lots of them about. Oh, I think they were just looking at other kudu. You can just have a look at why in this kind of vegetation having horns can be such a hindrance as opposed to a help. Particularly a kudu's horns, which are designed more than anything to look intimidating rather than to actually be exceptionally useful. And when they do fight, those horn clashes can be very dramatic, but not really injury-inducing unless they actually manage to get tangled up together. So it's purely for reproductive purposes, and most of the time just for intimidation purposes. And Joey, I'm glad that you have stuck with us this morning. Joey watching in Australia. He'd like to know how tall that kudu is compared to me. Joey, let me think of the easiest way of describing it. So if I am close to 165, 165 centimeters, maybe a bit taller. I'm not 100% sure exactly how tall I am. Around 5'7". Oh, that's beautiful. Oh boy, aren't you stunning? And his shoulder would come about up to, close to my shoulder actually, just a little bit lower, just a little bit lower than my shoulder, and his horns would be taller than me, so right from ground to the top of his horns, he would be taller than I am, and a great deal heavier. Look at that incredible beard slash dewlap. It's absolutely gorgeous. And speaking of his bearded neck, good morning to Liz. Liz, you were wondering whether or not there are any animals that get shaggier once it gets colder. So in kind of like things like bears getting their winter coat or Arctic foxes that actually change color completely, does anything similar happen in the African bush? And the antelope's fur might be a little bit thicker, but generally it's not something that they need. They don't need to change their coat as much as animals in more extreme climates might have to. Actually quite temperate here, and although we've been moaning about the cold, and it is cold, really, I mean, it never goes very far below zero, except with the wind chill factor, or below 32 degrees Fahrenheit. So our animals don't really need to grow too much of an extra coat, although I certainly wish that I could, in a way, just have a sort of a warm undercoat on. It's just no matter how many layers you put on, the cold bites its way through. Now, kudu have left. We shall continue onwards in search for the last section of the sunrise safari, see if we can't find that lioness for you. Now, Daryl, you were wondering, because the kudu does look exceptionally deer-like, you were wondering if a kudu is just like a deer. And the answer is no, not really. They're basically the African equivalent of a deer. they fill a very similar ecological place in the whole setup of the ecosystem. They're a very important food source for the predators. They're a browser of the various tree species. And they're a similar size to some of the larger species of deer, something like a red deer, for example, or a fallow deer, a bit bigger. The big difference between deer and antelope, or one of the big differences, is the horn versus antler situation. So an antelope has horns, which are solid bone that grow from sort of after their first 6 months. They start to deposit bone that then grows up in that very distinctive horn structure, whether it's a kudu or an impala or a wildebeest, that gets deposited and builds up. Now in our case, probably about half of the antelope species, the females do actually have horns as well. They will have those for the rest of their lives because it's bone. It's a solid structure that is permanent. Bit of a bumpy road, this. Whereas deer, their antlers is actually made from hardened blood vessels. Sorry about that, everybody. Just trying to get through the bumpiest part. That was the road that during the rains the elephants had an absolute wonderful time digging up the mud and throwing it around, and they left us with not much of a road at the end of it all. So Daryl, yes, the horns of a deer are sheddable and made of hardened blood vessels. And speaking of our different antelope, James Richard, you were wondering about the track size of a duiker versus a steenbok, and you were wondering how similar in size they are. The answer is very, very, very similar in size. A steenbok track they're both very tiny. We're talking about possibly less than an inch in length. A steenbok track is very sharp and almost like an impala. It's like a little mini impala. Very sharp and with defined edges. A duiker track looks like a perfect symbol of an iron. An iron is in the thing that you iron clothes with. The kind of thing that they'd use for the symbol on a t-shirt label or something that says "do not iron." That's the shape of a duiker track. Very similar in length, slightly wider and slightly more heart-shaped. But tricky, that's a tricky one to tell the difference between all of those. The little antelope, and when you throw baby impala into the mix, you've got an exceptional complication. I'm pretty sure that Brent was planning on heading back towards where that male lion was calling us, so I'm trundling towards Gallagher shortcut, but let's find out from him what his plans really are.
So that male lion called again and has headed to the north, so unfortunately no luck there. So I haven't quite given up on this lioness yet. Just doing another very slow and careful check to the south of the dam cam. A big group of buffalo bulls there. We'll go have a look at them shortly. I'm just trying to make sure we don't miss her or miss her tracks around here. Now I've got her tracks where she came down towards the pan, but finding tracks of her leaving are proving to be a little bit more difficult.
Ja, guys. So forward junction, go from Yala Road on the blocks to that's what Monzola. Okay,
So I'm just listening to the game.
Yes, number is the local. From the middle you can see on the east of the block. If you check
there we go. They've just found that male line almost exactly where I said to Ephraim. If you go to the Buffalo's Hook side and you go east towards Long Pole, that's where he sounded like he was heading. So someone's just found him right there. So he's in Buffalo's Hook. We thought maybe the lioness went towards Inga's house, but no such luck. Well, let's go look at some of these buffalo bulls. So while I was checking for tracks, walking up and down, they were watching me very carefully. Thank you very much, Maggie in Australia, who says I've been doing so well to let go of my addiction to the word so. I've only used it 9 times in the last couple of segments, and she would like to know whether the cameramen have been a bit nervous, obviously, because there was a lion around here earlier. Hello, big boy. So thanks very much, Maggie. And Maggie was wondering whether I'd been using the big stick formula to hit me every time I do it. I think this morning was too cold for any of that. I forgot the stick. And VM forgot the stick, fortunately for me. So these buffalo were sleeping up where those others are in the background, even when that lioness was here. And in the background you can hear Djuma waking up. Everyone is starting their day and we're about to finish ours, or morning at least. It is absolutely gorgeous at this time of the morning. The light is quite spectacular. So move forward slightly. Some very pretty light on the doves drinking at the waterhole. No, they took off as we got here, unfortunately. Oh, but there is a green pigeon. Are you okay there, Vim? You got him. Ooh. She's right here. Okay, I've got her calling. Right here, that lioness. She might be coming back towards the water. It sounds like she's on Mvubu Road. Is there anything behind us, Vim? That was very, very close, that call. So we're going to rush across there. I think she's no more than 100 or so meters away from us. She might not be on the road yet. Maybe she ran into that block. I did see some tracks around there. They weren't the clearest though. Or it could even be another lion. You never know. Opa, over the bump. Very bumpy in this vehicle. Bump, 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 bump. She was probably watching VM and I walk around trying to find her. So it sounded like she was just to the northeast of the road around here. Come on, give us a little call. trying to say, even if she disturbs some birds. Let's just take a little. This is where it's important to not be too over-eager. So, especially in this vehicle, which is very noisy, my ears are going to find this lioness before my eyes. So while we're going to sit here quietly and listen, let's go have a look at what James and Steph are doing next to the fire.
Things have warmed up a bit. As you can see, my face is now bathed in what was golden light, and it's now rather blinding, palish, yellow, whitish light. And how Steph's managing without the aid of a hat, I'm not really sure. I can see Jamie driving around there. Brent is basically over the back of your head, where you happen to be watching the screen. I worked that out. Yes, that's correct. He's just to the east of us, into the sun that is now scorching my eyeballs out of the front of my face. Now, we have a nice question from Sherry about, you say, I think you're a little confused about the seasons here. You say there's a dry season and a wet season, so when do people grow anything? Because it's either very wet or it's very dry. Sherry, first of all, our wet season is not really that wet, is it? I mean, the average rainfall in this area is between 450 and 600 millimeters of rain. 600 millimeters is 24 inches, so that's not a huge amount at all. 450 millimeters is 18 inches of rain. So I mean, there's not a huge amount of rain, and that's the growing season. That's when we try and grow crops out here. Any time sort of after the first rains, which might be, what could be any time from October.
Although I know from my wife's vegetable garden that tropical fruit, she's trying to grow granadillas in our garden, and they have suggested that we grow it in winter rather than in summer, because it's just too hot. You can't give them enough water. So there's definitely enough sunlight here to do crops year round.
Year round, yeah.
So complementary crops, but I don't know what the guys plant.
And water is the limiting factor, of course, and so is heat. So many people, if they have water around the place, they will grow vegetable gardens in the winter and not in summer. They'll grow maize in the summertime because the heat doesn't seem to affect them much. But just north of here, on the Letaba River, there are a whole lot of commercial farms, and it's one of the only areas in the country where you can grow crops year round. All year round you can grow vegetables. So yeah, if you can get enough water onto your crops, you can grow stuff year round. It's never too wet to plant anything here. You're never going to, you're never going to find a rice paddy in any of the areas out here. Then I found, well, I didn't really find it. I mean, he's been sat there all day. I tried to bring this sort of buffalo skull to bear, and unfortunately his horn came off. But it's quite a nice way of having a look here of what a horn looks like. And if you look into the middle of it, Chandra, can you see the middle of it? Yes. This is just the keratin sheath, everybody, of the horn, and inside it is where the bone would have gone. Now, I think this bone has been eaten away, Steph.
Yeah, definitely looks like it.
Because it's not on the thing there. Now, what would have eaten the bone?
It's gnawed on by so many different things.
Yeah.
I think, it could be anything. I mean, I would even imagine termites to a degree would even eat. It's quite high in calcium and potassium bone, and is obviously broken down eventually by rain and sun and water.
Well, that's quite interesting, because in here, I mean, Genre, if you don't mind, in there again, you can see that slightly discoloured greyish soil. And that certainly does look like termite mound to me, and I wonder if this hasn't actually, the bone's probably been eaten out by termites. It wasn't anything largely carnivorous, because, well, they wouldn't have been able to get at it. So I'll just show you where it was attached. John, if you might follow me. You know, I don't want you to strain yourself. I know you've been sat there for many hours now. But it was attached like that, and the bone from the skull actually grows outward like that, and then it's covered in this keratin sheath. And so the termites have probably got in there, and they've eaten it out. And what's also interesting, of course, and many of you will know this, are these keratophagous moths. And that's keratin-eating moths. And I'm going to ask Steph to tell you about them, because I always get this story a bit mixed up. Are you au fait with?
I can try. I mean, I don't quite know exactly. So this is a moth. This is actually what you're looking at over here is the pupae of the moth's caterpillar just before he became a moth. So he would have come out of the horn, had enough energy to pupate and turn into a moth, leaving this little cocoon basically, or the leftovers of the cocoon, and then flown off to find another horn. And I think on that note, we can cross over to Jamie, who's got some news for you.
With a horn.
Yeah.
We've come through and found a bachelor herd of impala, and I'm trying to show you again, but Rusty refuses to go into reverse, but there we go. Dark in colour, exceptionally fluffed up after the cold morning air, and accompanied by the fork-tailed drongos, fresh out of bed, or at least from roosting in the trees, and fluttering about trying to capitalise on breakfast. And when they're all puffed up like this, you can really see where impala get their Afrikaans name, the rooibok, or redbuck, because they do take on this incredible rich dark colour, especially when they're all puffed up and cold. Alright guys, over to Brent, he's found our lioness.
Success! We've got one of the lionesses here, another one. They haven't found each other, they're looking for each other, and this is the calling we've been hearing. So, she's just here. Located Djuma on Mvubu Road, just to the north of the dam. Look at her. So the other one's actually going the opposite direction. And you can see this is one of the ones that's had babies. You can see the suckle marks. So the other one's just gone off towards Gallagher, and this one's running in the wrong direction now. She might pick up the scent of the other one that's been going the opposite direction. There we go, she's changed direction again. Oh no, don't go east. So the other lioness is heading towards Gallagher Pan, from what I could see, but she disappeared in some thicket. Might hear a little call shortly. We're not going to be able to follow her into there. It's very, very thick and steep where she's going. She's still standing, or she's moved him? Oh, she's moving. Coming back this way. What they need is a little contact call. Come on, guys. Been talkative all morning. Oh, look at that. How beautiful is that with the backlights? Absolutely gorgeous. So she's definitely trying to talk with the other lioness I just saw disappear. They must have missed each other by 50 meters. Can you see her still, Vim? There she is. Okay, she's running. She's gone into that little thicket, let's see. Yeah, I'm just catching movement of her as she dashes through. She might pop out right around here. There you go, she's going to pop up right next to us. Hello, big girl. Shame you're looking for your friends. They went the other way. Oh, she's on the move again. Bouncy bounce. at her go. So they've just missed each other. The other lioness has gone directly the opposite direction. She's seems very excited to see one of the other members of the pride. She's probably not seen them for quite a while she's had these cubs hidden. Now let's see if she tries a contact call. Oh, isn't that beautiful? There we go, listen. Oh, look at that light on her face.
Ja, hoor. Ja, heeft die twee bij dat ook daarna.
So she's heading now towards the dam cam, or opposite it directly. She might go into the little river system that runs in front of the lodge. So I think we're gonna extend a little bit and just stay with her. I just think it could be really fantastic while she's on the move now. If we see them meet up, and then now she's spotted those buffalo. That's a bit big for her by herself. While we can stick with her, we will. But if she does go into one of these little river systems where it's too thick, we'll leave her. But I think this could be a very exciting reunion between the ladies. Might be worth getting Jamie, if she's close by, to head towards Gallagher Pan. After you, lady. She is quite hungry. That fat belly we're seeing there is from her engorged nipples, because she has cubs at the moment. Now I'm not sure which is lioness. This could be the one that's got the den side all the way in Tortured. Oh, there we go. I think she might have picked up the scent of the other. But it also could be the one that thinks got cubs on Djuma itself. So I saw two lioness, one just veering off like that, and then this one was running towards us. What she's hoping for is to hear the other female call. You can actually hear her breathing quite heavily. She's looking for the scent of the other lioness. Oh, she's heading in the right direction. Oh, was heading in the right direction. Here we go. She's literally on that other lioness's trail now. That's the last place I saw the other lioness, was just off through here. Now she's going back in the wrong direction again. Oh, she's heading slightly in a better direction. I'm just going to move around. So the last place I saw the lioness was right here. She was running down the road here, and the other lioness was going into these quarries over here. Straight down that big path there. She's just stuck behind that thorn bush. She should pop out in a second. She's on the right trail now. Sniffy, sniff, sniff, sniff. Oh, isn't this light just gorgeous? I hope you guys are getting some fantastic screenshots. Oh, my lens has missed it up a bit. So she is starting to head in the right direction now. So that clickety click is just me taking a few shots. She's going to come right past the front of the vehicle. Now, that lioness was walking very close to her. If she gets that right scent, she might even start running again. Nose to the ground. So I think we're going to, there we go, she's got the scent, she's on the jog again. Now I'm really hoping we're with them when they meet up. I think it's going to be quite a spectacular greeting. Unless she loses us in the bush, which is also possible.
Jagger Mike? Malum, do you know if Texan or Aubrey is out this morning? I know. Ephraim was looking to cross over and head towards Sutton, if that'll be right. So it's fine.
Oh dear, she's taking us to quite a thick little spot, but
do you know what
I think I've got a route to get around ahead of her onto the road. But she's on the right trail now. This is where I saw the other lioness disappearing. Watch out for the thorns there, Liam.
Okay, they're going mobile.
Now we've checked this road twice this morning already.
Yeah, you can hear something.
She should come out onto the road. There she is on the road, right on the trail of the other less. I think they're going to be drinking at the Gallagher Pan. I'm not sure whether there was more than one. I only saw one though. Okay. But the others could be ahead.
Yeah, I'm still far, my little one, on running that time. It's fine, running that time, just come along. Copy that, my little. So are they by Big Dam? Are they quite north?
Okay, so we're about 100 meters away from the Gallagher waterhole, and she's definitely in the, as I said, heading in the right direction now. So we're going to stay with her a little bit longer. Trying to see if she can hear the other lioness. She might let go a low contact call. Oh dear. No, she's off in the wrong direction. So I think it's going to take her a little while to be able to find the other lioness. But luckily enough, they should both be around for the sunset safari. So as we watch her disappear in the wrong direction, we're going to bid you adieu and thank you for joining us for a really early morning this morning. Well, for us, I know it suited some of you guys quite well, but we'll see you in a couple of hours for the sunset safari.